I'm Ben Murphy.
I'm Eric Urban.
I'm Hannah Jackson.
I'm Madeline Miller.
And we're unified.
Okay.
And, okay, we got everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, whole team, that's pretty
Unit
good.
5.
Okay, 5, question 2. Want to read it?
Sure. It says, how are individual rights protected in the body of the Constitution? Given the protection of rights in the body of the Constitution, would you have agreed or disagreed with the Anti-Federalist arguments for the addition of a Bill of Rights, and why? What additional rights, if any, do you think should be added to the Constitution, and why? And when you're ready, you may begin.
Explaining his philosophy of constitutional construction in a 1985 speech at Georgetown University, Justice William J. Brennan said, "The framers of the Bill of Rights did not purport to create rights. Rather, they designed the Bill of Rights to prohibit our government from infringing rights and liberties presumed to be pre-existing. Ultimately, the Bill of Rights would give substance and definition to those rights, but the framers first sought to protect them by dividing power and checking its excesses. The body of the Constitution thus reflects a structural and procedural rather than substantive approach to protecting the people from prosecutorial abuse."
It was the Anti-Federalists who insisted that substantive liberties would suffer under a strong national government and pressed for a Bill of Rights to limit federal power by defining the rights of the people. We agree with the Anti-Federalists. A substantive Bill of Rights is equally as essential to liberty as the procedural protections in the body of the Constitution.
The limitations of Article 1, Section 9 protect life, liberty, and property by incorporating early concepts of due process and applying them to Congress. The most prominent example is the explicit protection of the writ of habeas corpus from arbitrary legislative encroachment. Looking back at their history, the framers saw injustice that they wanted to ensure would not happen again.
In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the English crown would examine political opponents in the infamous Star Chambers, extracting coerced confessions and denying its subjects the right to a fair trial. These Star Chambers brought to light the need for a speedy and public trial. The lack of checks on the judicial system's power led to an erosion of personal rights. Although the body of the Constitution granted the 3 rights pertaining to due process, it was not enough.
The Sixth Amendment exemplifies the original idea of trial by jury found in Article 3, Section 2, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution by stating that there must be an impartial jury, a speedy and fair trial, and that the trial must take place in the same district in which the crime was committed. By demanding a local jury, it reaffirms the right to the jury of one's peers given to the Englishman by the Magna Carta, the right to a speedy trial, which was defined as within the 100 days after an arrest, since Barker v. Wingo in 1974, prevents damaging of reputation for the accused and the fading of witnesses' memories.
The First and Fourth Amendments expand upon the founders' ideas of natural rights. The First Amendment protects speaking and worshiping freely, and the Fourth protects from unreasonable prosecutorial abuse. We believe that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution should be amended to give the citizens of Washington, D.C. voting representation in Congress. Currently, the Constitution grants Congress with exclusive jurisdiction over the district in all cases whatsoever.
In 1961, the 23rd Amendment gave district residents 3 electoral votes. Despite this, the citizens of Washington, D.C. have long been denied voting representation in Congress. Justice Hugo Black described the right to representation as fundamental in the 1964 case Westbury v. Sanders. No right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which, as good citizens, we must live. Other rights, even the most basic, are illusory if the right to vote is undermined.
With more than 600,000 residents, the city of Washington, D.C. has a larger population than the states Wyoming, Montana, and Alaska, yet they have no elected representatives with voting rights in either the House of Representatives or the Senate. The people of Washington, D.C. pay the second highest per capita federal income taxes, yet they have no say on how our government spends their tax dollars. With all its statutory authority coming from Congress, this large group of citizens deserve the same rights of representation as other citizens do. Thank you.
Time 3:51.
Okay, we'll do 10 minutes cross-ex. Okay, you do the same thing with the 1 minute thing?
Sure.
Did you show them the 1 minute so they knew where they were?
Yeah.
Okay. You saw that?
Yeah.
I didn't see anybody real nervous. Okay, cross-ex, that's the first question.
Okay, one of the things, you didn't talk about the Second Amendment, so my question is, why has the Second Amendment remained so controversial?
The Second Amendment has always remained controversial because of the violence that is caused by guns, yet the need to have guns as a safeguard against our government ever becoming tyrannical. There's always been arguments on either side, and as violence erupts within schools and with minors obtaining guns, then the debate just continues on, and neither side has ever really won.
There's also been controversy dealing with the interpretation of the Second Amendment, as there's a comma, and there's a debate whether the founders meant that we should have a freedom a right to bear arms within a well-regulated militia, or if that right extends to outside of being in a militia. So.
And I definitely agree with both what Maddie and Ben said, and I think that a lot of current events that are going on also cause a lot of controversy, such as the shooting at Sandy Hook, and people feel like these guns should be regulated because of things happening like school shootings.
I have a question that goes off with that. What do you believe the federal government, within the outlines of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, can do to mitigate these gun violence issues?
I think that stricter purchasing rules for guns could be implemented, especially with like psychological testing. I do think that we need to be careful with implementing these and be very strict and lay it out very clearly with no vagueness, because I think that giving our government power to take guns away from people is also not good for our freedom. And beyond that, having stricter laws on gun safes and keeping them away from children, and hunter safety classes for people who own large rifles, things like that.
Okay, in your testimony, you talked about an additional rights of voters, of representation in Washington DC. Okay, what else is there that you can see that might be additional rights to add to the Constitution? Anything else? Everything's cool outside of those people not being able to have representation?
I think that a right to life bill would be a good add to the Constitution. I think that life needs to be defined as conception to natural death, and currently it's becoming a slippery slope with assisted suicides and abortions and euthanasia becoming more and more prevalent worldwide. I think that would be an important amendment to add at some point.
I would have to disagree with Maddie, and I would say that a constitutional amendment doesn't necessarily have to be added, because what the Supreme Court does is kind of makes those rules for us on a case-by-case basis, so constitutional amendment isn't really necessary.
Continuing with Hannah's thoughts, it's not necessarily that a new constitution needs to be added for, say, a life to right, or...
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there right there for a second, okay? Now I've asked you, each of your opinions to what could be added. She gave her opinion. You two are disagreeing with her opinion. That's not the question. The
So do you
question
want
is
us-
what can be added. I want your opinion as to what can be added. Okay, this is at a point now where, it's not right or wrong. She has her opinion. She says that's one that I think should be added.
I know.
Okay, whether you agree or disagree at this point is immaterial. What we want to know is what do you have in mind now? So if you say there's nothing else to add to it, and that's good, we're going to do right up to life and representation, then that's all that you can come up with, then that's okay. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Is here's the question. Stay within the question. Don't dovetail on that one. Now we're looking at what each individual one of you have to say about something you believe. And so you need to add another one or leave it. Okay? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have another one to add to, or are we good with the two that you've come up with?
Well, as I was saying, I don't think that another amendment necessarily needs to be added, but I think that some of the views of the amendments we already have need to be shifted. So, for instance, gay marriage, which has been going on which has been an issue going on for a while now. Our view is starting to shift where it's okay to have people of the same sex starting to marry without an amendment being added. So I don't necessarily think we need another amendment, we just need to shift our views of the amendments we already have.
Okay. Another question?
Okay, sure. There was one of you mentioned in your testimony, that, I think what I heard was that, the person who was talking about due process, talked about applying due process to Congress. And I wanted some clarification about what you meant by that. It could be that I misheard.
I don't remember.
No?
Yeah,
Okay, I wasn't
I'm
sure.
almost
Okay. Yeah, okay.
99% sure.
Okay, I'm sorry for wasting your time.
No, don't worry.
Because I was a little confused by that question. You did talk a lot about the First Amendment, and I'm wondering if somebody can talk to me about the difference between the First Amendment's free exercise clause and the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment?
So the free exercise clause is saying that Congress cannot make a law that would target or, Congress cannot establish a certain religion. So people are free to establish whatever religion they believe in. And then the free exercise clause is to be able to express your religion. So to be able to worship freely.
Where does the term, where would you say that I'm sure you've heard the term, the separation of church and state, where do you think that falls into those clauses, or does it?
I think it falls under the Establishment Clause, because in, like with the Church of England, they have established church, and so, with our government, they didn't want one religion to be the religion of the United States.
So, what do you think about references to God, for example, in government buildings? Do you think that's a violation of the Establishment Clause?
Like on the coin,
Yeah.
on our coins says in God we trust.
Right, or on, yeah, and on coins, or for example,
The
in
Pledge of
courtrooms?
Allegiance,
Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
the oath of office,
I
the
don't-
sentence.
Do you think that violates the Establishment Clause, anybody?
I don't think that specifically pushes any religion or
Mhm.
causes excessive entanglement. I think that this country was founded as a prominently Christian one, and that just reflected the views and how serious that all of our founders were when creating a lot of these things and how these views continue on.
And continue on what Maddie said when she talked about excessive entanglement, what you would need to use to kind of determine that if it was a violation is the Lemon Test. So there's 3 prongs of the Lemon Test, and the first would be to see if it has a secular purpose, a valid secular purpose. The second one would be that you're not advancing one religion over the other, and then the third would be that there would be no excessive entanglement in the government. And I don't believe that having "In God We Trust" on a coin or like the references to God really violate the Lemon Test and violate the free establishment or exercise clause.
But it is possible to argue that it does somewhat violate the second prong. You could argue that it's advancing Christianity over every other religion. So you could say that due to it violating the second prong of the Lemon Test, it is violating the Establishment Clause.
Can I
Mhm.
Sure,
add
go
something
ahead.
off of that? Do you think the federal government and the state's government even really protect people's right to even not choose a religion and not have a God? Is that protected in the Constitution? And if so, having "In God We Trust," is that really cool or not? I could have said that more eloquently.
I would argue that you're free to not have a religion. There's a fair amount of agnostic and atheists in this country, and there were agnostics even back when they were creating our Constitution. In God We Trust was simply meant to, like, promote how serious they were about the entire issue. And I don't think that having In God We Trust on a coin is forcing you to believe in a God. I think it's just something that's been there, and I think at this point it's part of our history.
Okay, if you haven't, say, go ahead and finish it. Are we good? Okay. Okay.
I'm just